The night my wife's hands went still, my daughter-in-law smiled at my kitchen and asked where I kept the deed. I hadn't even taken off the black suit from the funeral in Columbus, Ohio, October 18th, when Tara started opening cabinets like a buyer on a showing. My son, Evan, stood behind her with his jaw clenched, pretending not to hear. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell me where you're listening from. It helps an old postal man know he isn't telling this story into an empty room. I'm 68, retired USPS supervisor, south side of Columbus. This house, the one with the creaky hallway and the maple tree out front, is my pension in bricks. My wife and I paid it off in 2001. I remember the bank officer sliding the release across the desk like a blessing. After the service, people brought covered dishes and pity. Tara brought a binder, white tabs. "Downsized done right," she said, setting it in the center of my kitchen table where my wife used to roll out pie crust. "You shouldn't be alone here," Tara said, tapping the countertop. "This is too much house for one person." She talked like a commercial, safe environment, community amenities, chef-prepared meals. I stared at the backsplash we installed in 1998 and thought about the nurse changing my wife's IV on October 12th. When the room finally emptied, I rinsed 2 coffee cups and found a folded paper by the sink. A powder room refresh estimate, 2800, dated October 12th. The day my wife asked me to read to her from the seed catalogue. I slid that estimate into my pocket, right beside a hospice invoice for $1,942 that I hadn't had the heart to file. Evan followed Tara around, holding her purse like a footman. "We just want what's best," he said, not meeting my eyes. The oven timer dinged, someone had left a casserole warming, and no one moved. The sound hung there, a lonely little bell for the living. On the following Tuesday, October 22nd, Tara returned with color printouts of comparable sales. "If we stage before the holidays, we'll catch Q1 buyers," she said, flipping to a page with my street name at the top. "We'll need to refinish these floors. Buyers love original oak before pets scratch them." She looked at the photograph of my Labrador, Scout, on the mantel and smiled as if she were being kind. Evan squeezed my shoulder. "She knows what she's doing, Dad." I opened the binder. There was a pre-filled engagement letter addressed to me, her brokerage logo watermarked behind the lines where my signature should go. She'd already circled Cedar Pines, an assisted living place on the west side, and scribbled Best View next to a unit number. "We should at least put a refundable hold," she said. 6,000 locks it in. It's just good planning. "The ground is still wet on my wife's grave," I said. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from behind me. Tara didn't blink. That night I found the seed catalog where my wife used to keep coupons. I slipped the $2,800 estimate and the $1,942 invoice between the pages and underlined the dates with a red pencil. Then I pulled out a pocket ledger, the same kind I used on postal routes, and wrote October 18th after funeral. Tara asks for deed. October 22nd, binder, comps, Cedar Pines, refinish floors. I wrote slowly, like carving initials into a wet sidewalk. Somewhere in the house, the fridge motor kicked on and off, and the silence that followed was so complete it felt like a choice. When I finally turned out the kitchen light, the window held my reflection. Tie loosened, grief making a stranger of my face. "Don't let anyone bully you out of this house," my wife had once told me, tucking a recipe card into the box by the stove. I opened the box, and there it was, her handwriting in blue ink. I set the card on the counter beside the ledger and the seed catalog and realized I was building something. Maybe not a case yet, but a backbone. I locked the back door, jiggled the knob twice, and slept in my clothes on top of the covers, one hand on the ledger like a man holding onto the shore. On November 1st, I sat in my truck outside the Harrison Bank branch and practiced saying one word out loud. No. I said it softly at first, like it might break my teeth. "No, I'm not selling." It didn't sound like me. The branch doors hadn't opened yet, but Tara's texts already had. "Morning. Cedar Pines says their best sweets go fast. Let's get that refundable hold today. Grief doesn't come like waves. It comes like static. a constant hum behind every sound. The refrigerator, the television, even Scout's breathing at night all felt too loud. And inside that noise, Tara's voice threaded itself in every quiet corner of my day. She'd started reorganizing my calendar on the kitchen corkboard. Elder Care Tour. Nov 5th, 2 p.m. When I pulled the pushpin out, she laughed. You can't just sit here alone all winter. It's not safe. Safe. That word again. That night I went looking for comfort food and found instead a boutique bill in my wife's name. $476, dated October 29th, Très Jolie, Columbus, Tara's favorite boutique. The shipping address was my home. My wife had been gone 11 days. I drove to the boutique on Parsons Avenue the next morning. The cashier looked confused when I asked who picked up the order. Oh, that was Tara, lovely woman. Said she was updating your wife's account. I thanked her and left, hands shaking so hard I dropped my car keys twice. When I confronted Tara that evening, she didn't even flinch. Mix-up, she said. They probably used the wrong card. But I had already checked. My wife's credit card was still active, linked to a shared account. Evan must have left it unclosed when he helped me with the paperwork. That was the first night I couldn't eat. My coffee tasted like cardboard. My throat felt like sandpaper. I tried to watch the 10 o'clock news, but every commercial was about senior transitions and care communities. Even the TV mocked me. On November 3rd, Evan and Tara came for Sunday dinner. I roasted chicken the way my wife used to, stuffed with lemon and rosemary. The house smelled right for the first time in weeks. I thought maybe the evening would go quietly. But halfway through the meal, Tara said, "You know, we should think about getting these floors refinished before showing season. Original oak sells like gold." I stared at her. Evan said nothing, cutting his chicken into careful squares. I whispered, "Please stop." She smiled without teeth. "I'm just helping." The oven timer dinged, sharp and metallic. Nobody moved. Scout whined under the table. After they left, I walked the hallway, touching the walls, every dent and paint chip a memory of my wife's laughter. I passed the empty room where her sewing machine still sat under a dust cover and stopped at the nightstand. Her phone was still on it, silent. I scrolled through old voicemails until her voice filled the dark. "Leave a message. We're probably in the garden." I sat there for a long time, phone to my ear, until the screen dimmed and the room went black again. The next morning, I opened the mailbox and found a glossy brochure from Cedar Pines, same place Tara had circled in her binder. A yellow sticky note was attached. $6,000 holds your suite. Best view, no signature. Just that? I went inside, sat at the kitchen table and stared at the brochure. $6,000. That number felt like a ransom for my independence. I wanted to yell, to smash something, but all I could do was laugh, a dry, ugly sound that scared Scout so much he hid under the table. I picked up my phone, scrolled past Tara's messages, and typed into Google, "Ohio recording law. Can I record conversations in my own home? One-party consent, legal." I looked at the clock. 8:43 a.m. Outside, frost covered the maple leaves on the porch rail, glittering like tiny shards of glass. I opened my wife's recipe box, the one that still smelled faintly of cinnamon, and took out a stack of blank cards. I wrote 3 words on the first one: "Record everything now." Then beneath it I added the channel line I've repeated ever since. "Before I go on, if you're listening, please subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. I need to know I'm not the only father who's been pushed." That afternoon, I drove to Target and bought a small notebook, an extra phone charger, and a pack of AA batteries. The cashier rang it up, $14.62, and I underlined the receipt date when I got home. It wasn't courage yet. It was survival wrapped in paperwork. I poured myself coffee at dusk, the sun bleeding through the blinds, and opened the notebook. November 4, began recording. Tara wants me in Cedar Pines by Christmas. I looked around my quiet kitchen, every plate, every shadow still shaped by my wife's touch, and whispered, "They want to move me out, but I'm not going anywhere." Outside, the wind knocked a branch against the window. Inside, for the first time since the funeral, I felt something solid beneath the grief, a steady pulse of anger. deliberate and slow. Not the kind that breaks things, the kind that plans. On November 10th, I walked into the office of Judith Klein, elder law attorney on North High Street, with an orange folder under my arm. Inside were the hospice invoice, the 2,800 renovation estimate, and that boutique bill Tara had tried to pass off as a mix-up. Judith had kind eyes, but a voice sharp enough to cut through fog. "What exactly do you want, Mr. Harris?" she asked. "I want to keep my house," I said. "Lawfully," she leaned forward. "Then we'll start there." That orange folder became the start of my quiet war. Judith drew diagrams on her yellow pad, boxes and arrows linking my house, my accounts, and the people circling them like hawks. "We'll protect what's yours," she said, "and make sure no one can pressure you again." We set up a revocable living trust, naming me as the trustee. My house would move into it, safe from any family consensus nonsense. Then she explained a transfer on death designation, or TOD deed, so that when I go, the house would pass directly to my granddaughter, bypassing anyone with greedy hands. No probate, no manipulation. On November 14th, I met Mr. Patel at Harrison Bank. He was a soft-spoken man with a wedding ring that clicked softly against the desk as he typed. He frowned at my statement. "Mr. Harris, there's a pending authorization for $6,000 to Cedar Pines Holding LLC. He rotated the screen toward me. "Pending, not processed." The attempt came from a shared online banking portal Evan had helped me set up after the funeral. Patel leaned back. "We can move your pension into a fresh account. Close this one. Redirect deposits." I nodded, signing where he pointed. My hand didn't shake this time. That night I ate my dinner at the kitchen counter. Cold leftovers, but for the first time in weeks, the food had taste. Small victories have flavor. I spent the next few days quietly preparing. Bought a new Ring camera, positioned it above the porch, angled to catch anyone checking the property. I tested its motion alert. Worked perfectly. By November 16th, I had replaced the front deadbolt and reprogrammed the garage keypad. A young locksmith named Derek handed me the receipt, $140. "Smart move, sir. Keep those codes private." I smiled and told him I planned to. That evening I wrote in my ledger, "Locks changed, Nov 16, garage code new." Tara texted, "We need access for staging." Replied, "There are no showings." When she showed up the next morning with her tablet, she carried a pre-listing packet already printed with my address. "Just getting ahead," she said. "Marketing momentum matters. Who authorized this?" I asked. "Family consensus," she said. "I am the family," I replied. I hit record on my phone before she could answer. Later, over tea, I showed Mrs. Rosario, the neighbor who'd lived next door for 40 years, the same listing draft. She squinted through her glasses. "They've already priced it." I nodded. $499, she shook her head. "That's your house, John, not theirs." That night we sat in her living room, the smell of eucalyptus candles between us. I told her about my plan for Christmas Eve. "You'll be here?" She smiled. "Wouldn't miss it." By the end of the week, Judith had notarized every document. The trust, the TOD deed, and a letter revoking any informal financial convenience arrangements. We made copies. I slid one into a fireproof box beneath the hall closet and left one with her office. I labeled 4 envelopes in careful block letters. Renovation Boutique Assisted Living comps each held a set of proof, dates, bills and screenshots. I stacked them on the dining table under the nativity set my wife used to light every December. That night, I watched Tara's Instagram stories. Photos of open houses, candles and hashtags, such as the dream homes, holiday listings. She captioned one, "Helping families transition to what's next." I whispered to the empty kitchen, "Not this family." I spent November 18th rehearsing lines in front of the mirror like an actor. I practiced the look of calm for the night I'd need it most. The holiday dinner reveal, Judith called it when I told her. I walked to the back porch that evening and watched the first flakes of snow drift past the porch light. The yard looked like a stage waiting for actors. Somewhere down the block, a car horn honked twice, and then silence settled again. I slid my ledger shut, checked the lock on the front door, and whispered to myself, by Christmas Eve, this house will be mine in every way that matters, and they'll know it too. The wind rattled the windows, but I didn't flinch. For the first time in a long while, the sound didn't scare me. It sounded like applause. On November 16th, the locksmith's receipt still smelled of machine oil. I remember that scent, metal and new beginnings. Derek handed it to me with a grin. "Keep that one safe, sir," he said. "You'd be surprised how often family members forget they're not supposed to have keys anymore." I smiled thinly. "Not in this family," I told him. By the time the garage keypad blinked its new code, I felt lighter. A line had been drawn. That afternoon, I texted Evan, changed the locks for safety. "Evan, we need access for showings." There are no showings." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. The next morning, Tara arrived unannounced, tablet in hand, her perfume strong enough to turn the air sour. "You changed the locks?" she asked. "I did." "You're overreacting, John. Buyers—" "There are no buyers," I interrupted. "There's just you and a house that isn't for sale." She lifted her chin. "You're being manipulated by grief." Evans worried. "Is that what you tell yourself when you spend my dead wife's money?" She froze for a beat, just a beat, but I saw it. The flicker. The truth. I pressed the record button on my phone, voice steady. "Go on, explain the boutique charge." Tara straightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." She smiled, too wide, too white. "We'll talk when you're calm." And with that she left, heels clicking like a countdown. By evening I was sitting in Mr. Patel's office again. He'd printed new statements, clean account, no pending charges. But he showed me something else. 3 transactions in the last 10 days, he said, pointing to the page. Same boutique, same card number. But your wife's name, posthumous misuse, Judith had called it in one of her memos. That phrase echoed in my head all night. Back home, I placed those statements in the boutique envelope, labeled it in red. I underlined the date, November 16. The following week, Judith finalized the trust paperwork. We met in her office on Nov 20th, fluorescent light buzzing overhead, notary stamp clicking like a seal of sanity. She slid a crisp page across the desk. "Your house is now in the trust. Transfer on death deed, recorded at the clerk's office this morning. You're untouchable now." "Untouchable," I repeated. The word fit in my mouth like armor. When I got home, I opened my ledger. Nov 20, trust filed. TOD active. Will updated. Locks changed. Tara frustrated. The next day, I received a text from her. Would love to stop by with the photographer. "Quick lighting test." I didn't reply. 2 hours later, my Ring camera pinged. Motion detected at 2:14 p.m. The video showed Tara trying the doorknob twice before muttering, "He changed it," to someone off screen. I printed still frames, 3 in total, and slid them into a new envelope. Evidence. Entry attempt. Beneath it I wrote, Deck 7 potential trespass. My house had become both fortress and courtroom. Every corner held proof, every shadow a witness. Mrs. Rosario stopped by that evening with sweetbread. "You look different," she said. "Calmer." "I am," I told her. "I'm just waiting." "For what?" "For Christmas Eve." We rehearsed it together at her kitchen table over peppermint tea. She'd ring the bell at 7:15 p.m., holding a pie, our signal that the neighbors would hear every word. As we spoke, the old cuckoo clock on her wall struck 8. Its tiny bird popped out shrill and sure. "Sounds like justice warming up," she said. On Thanksgiving week, I rechecked everything, trust documents filed, utility passcodes ready to change on Deck 23, and copies of every statement stored on a flash drive inside my wife's old cinnamon tin. My wife had kept recipes there. I was keeping records. Tara called on Nov 28, voice sugary. "We should get the deed scanned before you misplace it, just to be safe." "Safe for who?" I asked. "For everyone, especially you." Silence. Then she hung up. That night, I took the casserole timer from the drawer and set it on the dining table beside the envelopes. Its ticking was steady, hypnotic. I realized I'd never used it since my wife passed. It would now serve a new purpose, a cue, a signal for truth. By Thanksgiving Day, the house looked like it had in the old days. Warm lights, polished silver, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. But under that calm surface, everything was loaded, each folder, each document, each tiny detail perfectly aligned. As I closed my ledger that night, I wrote the last line of the day. Stage set. Props ready. Audience unaware. Outside, a light snow began to fall across Columbus, turning every porch into a blank page. Mine already had the first words written. Justice begins at home. Thanksgiving tasted like cardboard until Tara asked for the deed at dessert. It was November 28th, cold enough for frost on the kitchen window, but warm inside from the oven heat. I'd roasted turkey the way my wife taught me, rubbed with butter, stuffed with thyme and lemon. It was my first holiday alone, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd keep the peace Evan carved. Tara poured wine. I watched her eyes scan the room, the way a realtor scans a listing, measuring square footage in her mind. She complimented nothing, not the meal, not the house, not even the framed photo of her daughter on the mantel. When plates were cleared, she set down her glass. "John," she said softly, "you should let us handle the paperwork for the house. Keep it safe in case anything happens." "The paperwork is safe," I replied. She tilted her head. "I mean the deed." The word hit me like a brick. Evan kept carving, slower now. "Why?" I asked. "For peace of mind. I can store it at my office. Fireproof cabinet. It's just smart." I laughed once, quietly. "No, Tara, it stays here." She forced a smile. "You're making this difficult." Evan tried to calm her. "Tara, just no, Evan, this is important," she said. Then to me, "You're acting paranoid. We're only trying to protect you." I looked her dead in the eye. "You're not protecting me. You're positioning yourself." The silence after that was sharp enough to cut. The only sound was the oven timer clicking down its final seconds. Later that night, I pulled Evan aside in the hallway, near the photo of his mother holding him at age 5. "Son," I said quietly, "did you try to pay $6,000 to hold me a room at Cedar Pines?" His eyes darted away. "It was refundable, Dad. Tara thinks a lot of things," I said. He swallowed. "She said it was to help." "I didn't. Do you remember the day we burned the mortgage in 2001? Your mother said this house would be our anchor." He said nothing, just looked at the floor. By November 30th, my phone buzzed with messages from Tara. "Quick question. Can I stop by Saturday? Need to measure windows for staging. Also, sent a photographer your way Monday morning. Don't worry, we'll handle it." She'd stopped pretending to ask permission. On December 7th, the Ring camera caught her trying the new lock. Timestamp 2:14 p.m. Her voice on the audio, "He changed it." I froze the frame on her hand, gripping the doorknob, and printed it. 3 copies. I slipped them into a new folder marked Entry Attempt. The next morning, Mr. Patel from Harrison Bank called. "Mr. Harris," he said, "we just blocked another transaction from the boutique. Same card, your wife's account. Declined." "Thank you," I said. "Please send me the memo." It arrived the next day. I added it to the growing stack of evidence. By December 12th, I met Judith again at her office. She drafted 2 letters, one to the brokerage's managing partner, alerting them that my address had been used in unauthorized listings, and another, a civil complaint draft for financial exploitation just in case. She told me not to use it yet. "You're playing chess," she said. "Wait for checkmate." That night, I sat in the glow of my wife's nativity set and reviewed every document. 4 envelopes, color-coded, a casserole timer that would cue my reveal, and a Ring camera clip that would destroy any doubt. On December 20th, I texted the invitation, Christmas Eve dinner at 7. "Bring champagne if you like." Tara replied within minutes, "Perfect. We'll celebrate new beginnings." I read that line 5 times. New beginnings. I knew exactly whose beginning she meant and whose ending she hoped for. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I polished the dining table, ironed the tablecloth, set 3 plates. Beneath each, I tucked an envelope labeled Renovation Boutique, Assisted Living, and under Tara's plate, I placed the extra COMPS, her own pre-listing sheet with my address on it. Mrs. Rosario stopped by on December 23rd to confirm the plan. "You sure you can handle it?" she asked. I smiled. "I was a postal worker for 35 years, Rosie. I've handled worse storms than this." She nodded. "Then we'll make sure everyone hears you." That night, I tested the projector one last time. The first slide, the $2,800 renovation estimate dated October 12th. The next, the bank alert showing the $6,000 Cedar Pines attempt. Then the boutique bill, $476, my late wife's name at the top. And finally, the Instagram screenshot, Tara's own post about holiday listings. I sat in the dark afterward, the projector's fan humming softly, the light flickering over the nativity set. It felt like confession. I wrote the final note in my ledger for the night. "Stage ready." Cass confirmed. "Justice reheats at 7:03 p.m. Then I closed the book, set the casserole timer on the table and whispered, "Let them toast to new beginnings. I'll make sure they choke on the truth." On the morning of December 23rd, I found a plain manila envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a printed screenshot of an Instagram story. Tara's story. The caption read, "Coming soon, Southside Charm. Message me for early access." My porch steps were right there in the picture, holiday wreath and all. I stood in the cold until my fingers went numb. Snow flurries dusted the paper, but I didn't move. Someone, maybe a neighbor, maybe a client of hers, had sent it anonymously, proof that she'd already started selling my life. I drove straight to Judith Klein's office. She studied the photo through her bifocals. "Perfect," she said. "That's intent. We'll draft a short cease and desist and deliver it first thing in the morning. For tomorrow, stay polite. Let her walk right into her own evidence." Judith reminded me again, "Facts, not fury. Speak in short sentences. Don't raise your voice. You're not fighting. You're confirming." I nodded. My plan wasn't revenge anymore. It was record-keeping with consequences. Back home, I ran through the dinner choreography one more time. The projector hidden behind the nativity angel hummed softly. The casserole timer ticked exactly 30 minutes. Each folder sat beneath its plate like a landmine. Mrs. Rosario came over at dusk, with her red scarf tied tight against the wind. "You ready, John?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." She patted my hand. "Remember, don't yell. Let the truth make the noise." That night, I tested every device. The Ring camera faced the driveway. The camcorder above the hutch recorded a wide shot of the dining table. I made a backup of the backup, saving the files onto a flash drive labeled Cinnamon, and tucked it into my wife's old spice tin. At 9:30, a text buzzed. "Tara, we'll be there at 7 sharp tomorrow. Dress festive, festive." I almost laughed. I poured myself half a glass of bourbon, sat in the quiet kitchen, and studied the reflections in the window, the same window where, weeks earlier, she'd stood talking about refinishing floors before pets scratched them. I could almost hear my wife's whisper behind me, "Measure twice." Cut once. At 10 p.m., I walked the house with my ledger in hand. Checking each note, locks changed, Nov 16, confirmed, trust filed. Nova 20, stamped or bank transfer, complete, secure, projector ready, tested. Neighbors aware, yes, everything aligned like letters on a postal route, no misdeliveries, no surprises. Then, just before midnight, headlights flashed across the blinds. A car idled outside for several minutes. I peeked through the curtain. Tara's SUV. She sat inside, phone glowing, taking what looked like pictures of the front of the house. I grabbed my phone and hit record from the porch window. The footage caught her license plate and the sound of her laughing to someone on speaker. He has no idea. This is going to be so easy once the paperwork's transferred. Transferred. Past tense. She drove off at 12:07 a.m. I saved the clip to the same flash drive. When I finally went to bed, the snow was coming down heavier. The world outside muffled, like someone had turned down the volume on everything but my heartbeat. I woke early on December 24th to stillness. The house smelled faintly of pine and lemon oil. I polished the silverware one last time, reheated the casserole, and set out the champagne flute she'd gifted us, our first Christmas together, ironic souvenirs. At 6:45 p.m., the doorbell rang once. I didn't answer. It was Mrs. Rosario's dry run, right on schedule. At 6:58, headlights appeared again, Evan's sedan. I took a slow breath, adjusted my tie, and whispered the line I'd practiced. You wanted a showing. Tara, let's show you something real. They walked up the path laughing, a wrapped bottle of champagne between them. The ring camera blinked red as they entered. Tara's heels clicked against the floorboards, that confident echoing rhythm of someone who thinks she's already won. The timer on the counter ticked steadily. 30 minutes to truth. We exchanged small talk, holiday nonsense, surface smiles. Tara praised the lighting, said, "This place photographs beautifully." Evan looked exhausted. I kept pouring wine, letting them talk. At 7:02 p.m., Tara raised her glass. "To transitions," she said. The casserole timer dinged. That tiny sound filled the room like a gunshot. I reached for the remote, thumb hovering over the play button of the projector. Tara frowned. "What's that?" "Something I've been meaning to show you," I said. The first slide lit the wall, the 2800 powder room estimate dated October 12th. The day my wife was still breathing, her face paled. Behind the flicker of light, snow kept falling against the window. The house, for the first time in months, felt alive. And as the next slide loaded, the bank slip for $6,000 to Cedar Pines, I thought to myself, she built this show. I just supplied the spotlight. The stage was set. The audience was trapped. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and signatures, maybe even reporters. But tonight, at 7:03 p.m. on Christmas Eve, justice was about to sit down to dinner. At 7:02 p.m., champagne hissed. At 7:03, my casserole timer cut through Tara's toast. "To transitions," she'd said, glass raised high. Her smile reflected in every ornament on the tree. But when the timer dinged, her eyes flicked toward it, uncertain, like she'd lost control of her own script. I clicked the projector remote. The kitchen lights dimmed. The first slide appeared. White wall, black text. The letterhead of Jefferson Home Design and Reno, a single figure, 12,800. Project description: powder room refresh. Tile, vanity labor. Date, October 12th. My voice didn't tremble. "That was ordered the same week my wife was dying," I said. "I found this folded on my counter the morning after her hospice nurse changed her IV. Evan looked confused. "Dad, what is this?" "Evidence," I said quietly. Slide 2 loaded. A screenshot of a bank alert. $6,000 attempted payment to Cedar Pines Holding LLC. I turned toward him. "That's the refundable deposit you approved for my assisted living suite. Pending on November 14th. Do you remember?" He blinked. "Tara said it was just..." Tara cut him off. "John, this is inappropriate. Not as inappropriate as trying to sell a man's home before the funeral flowers dried," I said. Slide 3. Boutique charge. 476 October 29th. Billing name Linda Harris, my late wife. The boutique's logo shimmered under the projector light. "This one," I continued, "is your favorite store, isn't it, Tara? The same one that told me you updated my wife's account." She swallowed hard, but kept her voice sugar smooth. "You're confused. Grief does that." "Then explain the shipping label," I said, stepping closer. "To this address on October 29th, 11 days after her death." The next slide flashed before she could speak. A photo collage of my porch, screenshots from her Instagram story, captioned, "Coming soon, Southside Gem." Gasps rippled from the hallway. Mrs. Rosario had arrived with her dessert, pie dish in hand, pretending surprise. "Perfect timing. I faced the projector, not them." "That's my house," I said softly. "You posted it 2 days ago." "Offered private viewings. Even blurred the address, but not the steps, not the wreath. Not the reflection of your phone case in the glass." Evan's mouth opened, but no words came. Tara set her glass down too hard. "This is insane." I nodded. "I agree." I picked up the remote again and played the short audio clip I'd saved. Tara's voice, clear and cold, Buyers love original floors before pets scratch them. Then Evan's chuckle. When it ended, the silence in that dining room felt like a courtroom. You can't record people without permission. Tara snapped. I met her gaze. In Ohio, one-party consent is legal, and the party was me. The Ring camera notification chimed faintly from my phone. Proof backing proof. I didn't even need to open it. I reached under the table, pulled out the 4 envelopes, and placed them in front of each seat like place cards. Open them, I said. Tara hesitated, then tore hers open. Inside was her own brokerage's pre-listing packet, the one she'd printed weeks ago, signed with a forged scrawl that almost looked like mine. Beneath it, a typed letter from Judith Klein, stamped and dated that morning. Cease and desist from marketing or listing the property located at 1847 Glenbrook Avenue without written authorization from its legal owner and trustee, Mr. John Harris. Further unauthorized activity will be referred to the Ohio Real Estate Commission and the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. Evan's envelope held a copy of the Cedar Pines attempted transaction. Patel's memo attached with the line, "Attempted debit declined. No authorization," he read silently, lips moving over the words until his face went pale. "Dad," he started. I turned to him gently. "Son, I loved you enough to trust you with my accounts. You loved her enough to give her access." He looked down, hands trembling. Mrs. Rosario set the pie on the counter. "You need witnesses," she whispered. "Always good to have a neighbor," I said. Slide 5 appeared, my wife's hospice invoice, 1942, and beneath it a scanned recipe card in her handwriting. Blue ink, faded loops. "Don't let anyone bully you out of this house." I read the line aloud, voice breaking halfway through. Tara shifted, gathering her coat. "We're leaving." "No," I said quietly. "You'll listen." I pressed play on one last clip, the Ring footage from December 7th. Tara, on the porch, testing the doorknob, muttering, "He changed it." The date stamp glowed at the bottom. Evan looked at her. "You said you never went there." Her jaw clenched. "I was checking on him. With a photographer?" I asked. Her silence answered for her. I let the projector hum a moment longer, then turned it off. The lights returned to normal. The hum of the furnace filled the air, soft but steady. I spoke slowly, deliberately. "Here's what happens next. You will remove every trace of my address from your marketing materials within 24 hours. You will contact Cedar Pines and withdraw any applications made in my name. You will not use any accounts connected to my late wife, nor set foot on this property again. If you comply, this stays between us and the brokerage. And if we don't?" she asked, her tone brittle. "Then my attorney files on January 6th. Tara looked at Evan for backup, but he just sat there, staring at his plate. The man who once helped me paint this dining room couldn't even meet my eyes. Finally, she stood, grabbed her coat, and hissed, "This is grotesque." "What's grotesque?" I said softly. "Is selling memories that aren't yours." She stormed toward the door. Evan lingered a moment longer. "Dad, I didn't mean for this to happen. Meaning doesn't rebuild trust," I told him. "Paperwork does." He nodded once and followed her out into the snow. Through the window, I watched their taillights fade down Glenbrook Avenue until the red glow disappeared. The house felt warmer immediately. Mrs. Rosario broke the silence. "You handled that like a judge, not a man with a grudge." I smiled faintly. "Justice doesn't need shouting. It just needs receipts." We stood there a while, the nativity lights casting small halos across the room. I looked at my wife's handwriting on the projector screen one last time and whispered, "I kept the house, love. Just like you said." Then I blew out the candles one by one and locked the door behind me, not to keep anyone out this time, but to keep peace in. By the morning of December 26th, the snow had turned to a gray crust over the yard, and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tara's number flashed first, then vanished. Then came a new number, a blocked caller ID that left no message. I didn't answer either, but I didn't need to. Judith called me before breakfast. "It started," she said. Her tone was calm, almost pleased. She'd already forwarded me a copy of the cease and desist letter she'd sent to Tara's brokerage that morning, attaching screenshots of the Instagram post. the ring stills, and a neat timeline of the transactions. It was bulletproof. By noon, the brokerage's managing partner had replied. I opened the email on my old desktop, slow, clunky, but satisfying. The message was short. Dear Mr. Harris, we've initiated an internal review and have immediately removed Ms. Thompson's Tara's promotional materials related to your address. You have our apology. You may expect written confirmation by week's end. No denial. No excuses. Just surrender in plain text. At 2 p.m., I met Mr. Patel at the Harrison Bank branch. He confirmed that no funds had moved, not $1. He even handed me a printed memo summarizing the blocked attempts under the line, declined. Unauthorized origin. I thanked him and he smiled. Not many folks your age keep track the way you do, Mr. Harris. My father could learn from you. That night, I filed my first police incident report in 40 years, not as an accusation, but as a record. I drove to the Franklin County precinct and handed the officer a small folder. He flipped through the boutique statements and the bank memo, nodded and said, "This is clean documentation. We'll issue a report number for identity misuse." It was official. Tara's games had crossed into recordable territory. Evan showed up the next day, alone. He looked smaller somehow, his hair uncombed, his jacket buttoned wrong. "Dad, I didn't know she posted the listing," he said. "I thought she was just helping." I studied him for a long time before speaking. "You thought a lot of things, Evan. None of them about me." He looked down at the kitchen floor, the same floor Tara had called original oak. "She said you were confused, that you needed structure." "I needed honesty," I said. He nodded. "She's moving out, temporarily. Temporarily. She says she'll fix it." "I don't think she can." I poured him coffee, the way I always had. "If you ever wonder how trust breaks, it's one withheld truth at a time. You withheld plenty." He rubbed his temples. "Are you really going to sue her?" I pointed to the cinnamon tin on the counter, the one holding the flash drive. "That depends on whether she learns what boundaries look like." Tara tried to retaliate online 2 days later. A Facebook post from her business account read, "It's sad when grief becomes confusion and confusion becomes blame." But the brokerage removed it within hours. Judith forwarded me their internal memo with a note, handled. 2 more days passed. The phone was silent. My home, peaceful. I sat at the kitchen table with my ledger, flipping through the pages. Oct 18, funeral. Oct 22, binder nove. 14, $6,000 attempt. Deck 24, dinner reveal. Deck 26, cease and desist issued. Deck 27, police report filed. Each line was a small victory written in ink. That night, I brewed tea instead of coffee and stood by the window watching snow fall under the streetlight. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the faint jingle of Mrs. Rosario's wind chimes next door. She called across the fence the next morning while I shoveled. "Well, lawyer lady says you won, huh?" I grinned. "We're not done yet. January 6th is next. What happens then?" I leaned on the shovel. "We file. On January 6th, true to my word, Judith filed a narrow civil complaint in Franklin County Court, injunctive relief, and minor damages for unauthorized use of my likeness and address in real estate marketing. Nothing dramatic. Just clean paperwork and principle. She sent me a copy of the front page, case number printed in the top corner. I slipped it into the ledger right after the last page of December. That night, as I turned off the lights, I thought about Tara's face when the projector came on, the way her confidence evaporated. The look of someone realizing too late that kindness has teeth when pushed hard enough. It wasn't vengeance that filled me with calm. It was the paperwork, the timestamps, the proof. Every detail neat as a stamped envelope, every wrong addressed correctly. For the first time since October, I slept the whole night through. On the morning of January 23rd, I polished my old postal tie, the navy one my wife had always said made me look official, and headed downtown to the Franklin County Courthouse. The air was sharp, the sky gray, and the snow along the curbs had turned the color of coffee grounds. Judith met me at the steps, her briefcase tucked under one arm. "You ready, Mr. Harris?" she asked. "I've been ready since October," I said. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of varnish and dust. We took our seats at the plaintiff's table. Across from us, Tara sat beside her attorney, dressed in realtor black, hair pulled tight, lips pressed into a thin line. Evan was behind her, 2 rows back, hands clasped like a man praying for the end of a storm he helped create. The bailiff called the case, Harris vs. Thompson, and the judge, a woman with glasses perched low on her nose, nodded for Judith to begin. Judith's voice was calm, methodical, almost surgical. "Your Honor, this case isn't about money," she said. "It's about boundaries and what happens when those are ignored in the name of greed." She walked the judge through the timeline, one exhibit at a time. The $2,800 renovation estimate, dated October 12th. The bank slip, $6,000 attempted debit to Cedar Pines Holding LLC. The boutique statement under my late wife's name. And finally, the Instagram screenshot showing my porch captioned, "Coming soon." Every page slid across the desk with a soft thud, as deliberate as a gavel. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, hands clasped behind my back. My voice came out steadier than I expected. "I'm not here because I hate my daughter-in-law," I said. "I'm here because I loved my wife enough to protect what she built. She made this house our anchor, and I'm not letting anyone sell it while I'm still breathing." Tara's lawyer objected, something about family misunderstanding, but the judge waved it off. "Continue, Mr. Harris." I lifted a single sheet, the one with my wife's handwriting. "This is the last note my wife left me," I said. She wrote, "Don't let anyone bully you out of this house. That's what this is about." Judith handed over a copy of Mr. Patel's bank memo, and the judge scanned it, frowning slightly. "Declined unauthorized origin," she read aloud. "And this was initiated from a joint account accessed by the defendant." "Yes, Your Honor," Judith said. "And the defendant's firm used the plaintiff's address in marketing materials without consent," Tara finally spoke, her voice brittle. "It was an error in scheduling, a miscommunication. I removed it immediately." Judith raised an eyebrow. "After we sent a cease and desist." The judge adjusted her glasses and leaned back. "Ms. Thompson, in your professional opinion, would you say it's ethical to list a property without the owner's permission?" Tara hesitated. "No, Your Honor." "Then that's all I need," the judge said. The ruling came 30 minutes later, clear, concise, final. An injunction barring Tara or her brokerage from using my address, marketing my property, or accessing any account tied to my late wife's name. A formal notation of elder financial exploitation averted, to be attached to her professional record for review. A refund of the boutique charges plus court costs. No yelling, no drama. Just signatures, stamps, and quiet justice written in black ink. As we stepped out into the hallway, the winter sunlight poured through the tall windows, golden and cold. Evan was waiting near the water fountain, his eyes wet. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm sorry." I nodded. "So am I." "I forgot Mom's voice," he said. "I remembered it today." I rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then maybe we both got something back." He looked at the floor. "Are you going to change the trust?" "Not yet," I said. "Trust has to be earned, same as money. Takes time." We stood there for a while, the silence between us more honest than words had ever been. Outside, Columbus hummed quietly under the snow. I tightened my scarf, breathing in the cold, clean air. For the first time in months, I wasn't carrying a folder or a fear. Justice doesn't roar. It whispers. It sounds like the scrape of a judge's pen, the click of a door locking properly, the sigh of a man walking back to a house that's still his. When I reached home, the porch light flicked on automatically. I paused on the step and looked at the old brass plaque my wife had polished every spring. It read 1847 Glenbrook Avenue. The numbers had never looked steadier. By February, the snow had melted off the porch steps, leaving wet trails like veins across the wood. The house smelled faintly of lemon oil and pine, clean again, alive again. For the first time in months, I woke up without dread pressing on my chest. I fixed the loose stair on the porch, the one my wife used to curse at, and replaced the burnt-out bulb by the mailbox. Small things, but they felt like declarations. I'm still here. Inside, I moved through each room with a quiet kind of reverence. The sewing room, the living room, even the narrow hall where my wife's oxygen machine used to hum. I opened windows wide and let February's crisp air pour in. Scout padded around the floorboards like he sensed it too. The shift from tension to peace. Mrs. Rosario came over that weekend with a pot of caldo and a grin. "You look 10 years younger," she said. "Paperwork will do that to a man?" I told her. She laughed. "Not many people get to beat the devil with a file folder." We ate together at the same dining table that had once felt like a battlefield. The projector was gone, the envelopes tucked away. Now it was just wood, light, and warmth again. A few days later, a thick envelope arrived from Judith. Inside was the final court confirmation. Injunction permanent, refund processed, brokerage reprimanded, case closed. At the bottom of her letter she'd written, "Congratulations, Mr. Harris. You turned grief into boundaries." Most people never make it that far. I folded that line carefully and slid it into my ledger under January 23rd. Life began to reshape itself slowly. Evan texted me once or twice a week. Short messages. "Thinking of you. Weather's bad, stay warm." Nothing deep, but it was something. I didn't respond every time. Trust takes silence too. In mid-February he showed up on the porch, hat in hand. "She moved out," he said. "For good this time." I nodded. "You doing all right?" "Trying," he said. "Therapy mostly." They said to start by admitting I let it happen. "That's a good start," I said. "Owning your part." He stared at the front steps, the repaired one gleaming slightly in the sunlight. "Mom would have handled this better." I shook my head. "She would have forgiven too early. I waited too long. Between us, maybe we balanced it out." He smiled at that just a little. Then he handed me a small box. Inside was my wife's favorite teacup, the one she'd given to Tara years ago. "Found it when I was packing her things," he said. "Figured it belonged here." It did. I placed it back on the kitchen shelf, next to the seed catalogue, where her note still rested. Later that week, I went through my insurance and accounts, updating beneficiaries. My granddaughter's name went next to everything. The house, the trust, even the small savings account my wife used to call our rainy day stash. I wrote her a letter to go with it. Integrity is the only inheritance worth protecting. When people show you their hunger, believe them. When you find peace, guard it. I sealed it in an envelope labeled "Open when you're older." By March, the days stretched longer. I joined a small group of postal retirees who met every Thursday at the diner off Parsons Avenue. Over coffee and pie, we traded stories. Lost mail, bad bosses, winter roots that froze our breath mid-air. One man mentioned his daughter trying to move him into one of those care places. The others laughed nervously. I just said, "Keep your name on your deeds, fellas. That's the best vitamin for your heart." They laughed again, but I could tell they understood. On the first warm afternoon of March, I opened every window in the house. Sunlight spilled over the dining table, glinting off the silverware I'd once used to expose the truth. Mrs. Rosario waved from her porch. Scout barked once and lay down in the doorway. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood in the kitchen listening to the wind flutter the curtains. For a moment, I swear I heard my wife's voice in the garden, humming the same hymn she'd sung when we first planted the maple tree out front. I whispered back, "We kept the house, love," and the wind rustled like applause. By April, Columbus was waking up again, early blooms pushing through cold soil, and the maple in my yard glowing with the same new leaves my wife used to call little hands of spring. I sat on the porch most mornings, coffee in hand, ledger closed for good. The fight was over. That's when I saw it. Tara's face smiling from my phone screen. I hadn't looked for her. The algorithm just decided to remind me. There she was, hair perfect, standing in front of a different house just 2 streets over. Caption, "Another one sold?" The irony landed softly, almost kindly. She could still sell houses, just not mine. I didn't feel anger, just relief. She'd moved on to someone else's front porch, someone else's story. My house was off limits, locked in a trust with a clause even she couldn't untie. That same week, an envelope came from her brokerage. Inside was a formal letter on embossed stationery. Mr. Harris, this correspondence confirms the completion of internal ethics remediation for Ms. Tara Thompson. The firm regrets the distress caused by her actions and extends our sincere apology. We appreciate your patience and professionalism throughout this matter. A neat corporate bow on months of chaos. I tucked it in my ledger, not out of bitterness, but as a certificate of closure. 2 days later, Evan came by again. He looked better, shaved, rested, a jacket I'd given him years ago zipped up against the breeze. He stood awkwardly at the doorway, same as he had when he was a boy caught in trouble. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course," I said. He followed me into the kitchen and stopped beside the table, the same table where his wife's lies had burned under the projector light. His eyes traced the polished surface. "Hard to believe this is where everything came apart," he said. "Or where it came together," I replied. He looked up, uncertain. "I wanted to thank you for not destroying her completely." "I didn't need to," I said. "Truth does its own demolition." He smiled, small and tired. "I've been thinking about Mom a lot. What she'd say if she saw all this." I poured him coffee, black, no sugar, just how he'd liked it as a teenager, trying to act grown. "She'd probably tell you to listen more and trust slower." He laughed softly. "You sound like her." "She's still in the walls," I said. "This house remembers her better than I ever could." He looked at the mantel where her recipe card still sat framed, next to the teacup he'd returned. "Dad, are we okay?" he asked quietly. I thought about it for a moment. "We're beginning again. That's the best any family can do." He nodded, eyes glossy, and reached for his mug. I saw a tremor in his hand, the same kind I used to have when grief was still new. When he left, he paused at the doorway. "For what it's worth," he said, "I'm proud of you." "Don't be proud," I told him. "Be careful. Pride starts most fires." After he was gone, I walked through the quiet house. The afternoon light fell across the floorboards, and I noticed something I hadn't seen in years, the faint dent from when Evan, at age 6, dropped his toy truck. My wife had refused to sand it out. "It's a good scar," she'd said. "Proof we lived here." I sat down, pulled open the recipe box again, and took out her note. "Don't let anyone bully you out of this house." The edges had curled slightly, the ink fading to a pale blue. I smiled. "Mission accomplished," I whispered. The clock ticked softly. Somewhere outside, Mrs. Rosario's wind chimes sang their uneven song. The world was ordinary again, and that felt extraordinary. Before turning in, I wrote one final line in my ledger, the last entry I'd ever make. April 4th. Porch repaired, house secured, peace restored. Tara sold another home. Evan came for coffee. The story ends where it began, in this kitchen. I closed the book and looked around the room one more time. Revenge had never been the goal. It was always about keeping what mattered, standing where love had rooted itself. The rest, apologies, letters, ironies, were just the weather passing through. As I turned off the light, I said the words that had become my quiet epilogue. "You didn't lose me. You gave me away. I just took myself back. And for the first time since the funeral, I didn't feel like I was living in a house full of ghosts. I was home,